Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and today we're going to learn how to do some general maintenance on your paintball markers. Okay, so we're looking at a Tippmann TCR today. We're going to go through the gun, pull it apart, maybe explain a little bit of it to you, and then we'll take apart one of the magazines too. So this is the 12-round mag, works the same as the 7-round mag. Kind of give you an idea of how to do basic maintenance and maybe a little bit more in-depth maintenance than you would normally do just by looking at a manual or understand by looking at the manual. So we'll take it apart and kind of go through some of the stuff. I've already removed the sights that sit up here. It has no barrel in it. I already took that out. There's not really stuff that we need to worry about. So as with any gun, make sure that it is degassed, make sure that it is safe to work on before you start taking anything apart so that we don't have any problems while you're working on it. It's a little bit hard for a TPX or a Tippmann TCR to have gas in it, extra gas, especially if the magazine is missing out of there, which it is. So just another way to check the gun. All right, so let's take it apart. We'll do the magazine afterwards at the end. The magazine's pretty simple. So there's a lot of screws to take apart on this gun. So handy dandy electric screwdriver really does make it a little bit easier. A lot of doing on this one. So first we're going to take out the front 2 screws. They're quite long, and that will let the front shroud release off of there. I'm going to put these in here so they don't get lost. Things get lost all the time. Now, the next thing we'll do is we'll take out the lever that lets you get into where the CO2 goes. For that, I do need some sort of punch, and I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Ugh. So we're going to open that up, and there's a pin right there that we're going to pop out. That's a little bit better in focus right there. So we're going to pop that out of there. And really all we need to do is just push from the top, and it comes out very easily. That will let us take this out easily as well. Now, cool thing about the TCR, if you are not, well, depending on what handed you are, if you are left-handed, right-handed, however you like to hold this thing, and say you don't like loading cartridges into the left side, you can take this out like we have. You can take this side off, this rail, you take it off, and the inside here, so this cylindrical housing that is inside here that holds the 12-gram cartridge, you can actually rotate it 180 degrees so that it is on the other side, and you can put this handle over here. So you can control what side you want to load the cartridges from if you're using a 12-gram cartridge. If you're not and you're running it through this, it really doesn't matter. But I think that's cool. They'll give you the option. Whether you ever use it, you might. I don't know. You can probably learn to do it one way or the other. But it gives you the choice. So we'll break down the rest of the gun. Underneath here, inside the gun, it's basically a TIPX. So it's their pistol that has been converted with a different body and various features to make it look like a bigger, slightly bigger, I guess, gun. Those are long ones there. Kind of keep them off to the side. Now from here, we've got everything loose, and I'm going to try to just separate it out without taking the screws out and setting them somewhere else. So if we can keep the screws where we are without, losing them, when we put it back together, we have a better chance of not leaving anything out. So we're going to kind of just pry up all the way around just to get it loose. And there is one other place where this is still hooked together, and that's down here. If we look at the bottom, there is actually a little tab. You can see it's locked over itself right there. So we do need to separate those out to get this to come apart. And usually we can kind of just get this up and then force this to want to open up. If it doesn't, oh, maybe it's because I forgot that screw at the bottom. That would be helpful. That way that can open up and come apart down there. Always helps to pay attention. All right. Now, as with any of these Tippmann guns, the TCR is not exempt from this. When we take this front or top shell off, there is a mainspring, I guess you want to call it the breech, is all inside there, and it could possibly pop out. So I'm going to kind of lift it up, and you can see my finger underneath here. I'm going to hold the breech down, and I'm going to try to slide it out. And everything pretty well came out. There's some stuff that we'll look at on the other side. But it's all pretty well held in place back there. So if you're not sure about your gun, or you've never taken apart a TPX or anything like that, this is pretty much how it looks inside a TPX. This is a little different, obviously, because of the housing. And this is not in a TPX here as well. This is the remote adapter line. But really everything else is going to look very much identical to that. So let's get the rest of it apart. I don't want to just yank anything out. Actually, I should probably show you what's in here before we go any further. So I'm going to pull the safety out of this side. I'm going to put the safety back in here. And then there's one other piece that might have fallen out, or it did fall out, right there. So that's your ball detent, and that actually sits right there. It's got dual detents. It's got one on each side so that it really holds the ball in place right there. And this one was stuck in here when I took the upper half apart. That would normally sit like that. And we haven't lost any of our screws, which is good. We'll set that over there. All right. So from here, what are we going to do? We're going to get the rest of it apart. I think I already said that. So we're going to take, we're not going to take this out because these two screws, you can see them here and here, are what's coming in from the other side to hold this in place. You would remove those two and rotate it around and put them back in on this side if you wanted to change that setup on the back there. So let's try to get the rest of it out. Let's get our tube out of here. A transfer tube that goes from the CO2 cartridge back here to the regulator. Our breech. Now our breech has, like I said, the two O-rings on it, or two detents. Our bolt, we'll put that all back together. You can see there's the other one, and they fit inside like that, one on each side. Let's take this out of here, kind of get this freed up like that. Now I think that you can't just pull that out. You can't just slide the stock out the back. There is a index mark right here which fits in with the stock on this side, which you do need to kind of lift it out to get it out of the way. There's that. There's a little piece here. This is your plug for your hopper feed. But as you can see with this breech right here, this breech isn't set up to accept a paintball through the top right there. This is going to sit like this inside of here. And there's no way for the paintball to come through and feed into there. So it is removable, and you can obviously see that that goes through there, but the breech doesn't work for that. So you would need a different style breech that would accept a hopper design on there. So here's your components. We'll kind of get them out of the way. We have our bolt, which is right here. We have our regulator, which is here. This is our transfer for remote line setup coming up through here. This also is our pressure relief valve is inside here as well. So it's got two things working inside this regulator. You have your regulated air to shoot the ball, and then a relief valve in case you overpressurize the gun, or if the pressure climbs too high. That way the gun isn't overpressurizing and potentially becoming a problem. It will bleed out the back through here. If your pressure, I think, climbs over 350 psi, it will bleed out, which is normal. So if you have a leak coming through the back of your regulator, make sure that it is not, the pressure relief valve isn't properly set. So go into the manual and reset it. And if that is properly set, then you need to go through your regulator and look at why it's not working. One thing I will tell you though is the adjustment for the regulator and the adjustment for the pressure relief valve are in the exact same spot. You just need a larger Allen key for one and a smaller Allen key for the other, and they both pass through the same section. So don't accidentally change one or the other. Read your manual and be very careful as to which one you are actually choosing, or changing, not choosing. Let's take this and this, or a trigger can come out of there. We've got, this is just a little piece right here. When the magazine slides up in, this piece actually hits the top of it like that and will release the magazine when it's locked down in the lower position. So it is very important that that piece be in there so that the magazine works properly. So that goes in there. We've got our linkage arm, which is right underneath here, like that. This goes from the trigger. So there's a pin that goes right there. This goes through there. And you can see how the trigger hooks into that linkage arm. And you can see it's moving the linkage all the way to the back right here. So you've got a couple sections of your bolt down here. This is like an on-off valve on the bolt. So when the bolt is pressurized or has pressure running into it through this section right here, this little pin will actually pop out. Now it's kind of hard to get it to come out by hand. I probably won't. Oh, I did get it. See how it pops out like that? So it'll be in the closed position, if you want to think of it that way. And when you pull the trigger like this, and this arm moves forward, the back of the arm right here pushes against the pin, and it opens up the air, makes the gun shoot, and then pops back out and resets when you let go of the trigger. So this is an important part of the gun as to shooting and function, and we'll break it down so you can see what's inside of there. We'll start breaking all of these pieces down. So we'll start from the front and work our way back. I don't want to take that all the way out. It looks like I might to get that out of there. The pin, so let's just take it out. We're going to have to do it anyway. Thought I could slide that one out of there without having to, oh, it did come out, without having to take this apart. Here's right here. Now the pin does have a snap ring on the front of it and a little button on the back right here. So you can see that you can push the button in. When the button gets pushed in, a little pin comes out the front and it punctures the CO2 cartridge. So that's why in a Tippmann, when you first put the cartridge in and you shut the door, the pin or the cartridge is not punctured. When you first pull the trigger for the very first time, the trigger rolls forward, pushes on that pin, and punctures the cartridge, or releasing the gas. So that's why you have to pull the trigger one time on a cartridge setup before the gun will actually work or do anything. So if you have any leaks through there, you need to remove the snap ring. The bumper will come out. These tend to get old and hard and brittle over time, and they'll just crack and fall apart. So if you have a leak, if you put your cartridge in and you pull the trigger and it just leaks out the front, check that little seat right there to make sure that it's okay. Other than that, you just have the pin in the inside there. It's a very simple setup. So air is going to go into that, through there, up through this block, and then out the block, through the transfer tube, coming down this way, and then going into the regulator. So disassembling of the regulator. I don't want to pull this apart right here at this point, just because I'm pretty sure they've Teflon this in place, and I don't want to ruin the integrity of the Teflon. We can remove that out of there. All of these transfer tubes have a little teeny O-ring that's at the end of them, and that's the only thing that seals these transfer tubes in there. So if you have a leak coming from there, always inspect these tiny little O-rings here, 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 and on the underside of the on-off valve, just to make sure that they're okay as well. From this point, let's open up the reg. So here's our spring. It's basically our reg spring and pin right there. We have our reg seat. That's going to go in there like this. And the pin pushing up against the seat is what's going to seal it up on the inside. You have one O-ring on there, which is going to seal this housing onto the back. So check that O-ring, check the seat. If you have any problems with the reg creating the proper output pressure, the reg seat could be it. If it's supercharging, meaning it's overcharging, the reg seat can be the problem as well. So reg issues, pull it apart and look at the reg seat and pin to make sure that they are functioning properly. And you can pull the front off here. Here's our mainspring. This is our adjustment right here, our adjuster. We have our piston that sits right inside here. We can push her out with something a little bit smaller. And another O-ring on the piston. So this is just a protector so that the spring doesn't destroy the brass inside here. And that's going to sit right up against that. Inside the piston, that little screw you see right there is our relief valve. So this piece with this large Allen key is what you would be controlling your velocity with. A smaller one, let's see, I think it's a 1/8 going in there, is going to control the pressure relief valve. And people all the time go in and start controlling this one because they think they're changing their velocity when all they're doing is just changing the pressure relief setting and causing leaks in their gun. So let's go ahead and set it back together. I'm going to look at this O-ring real quick. It's got a little bit of a dirt spot on it, which is not a big deal. Just want to make sure that it wasn't bad. Seeing as though it is a brand new gun, I want to make sure that it stays brand new. All right, so we'll put that back together. Then we're going to turn it over. We're going to get all that. So I want to make sure that my reg seat goes in properly. I'm going to set it down in there. And you can see, you might be able to see, might be too dark in there, that the reg seat does fit right down inside of there. There's a special little groove that it sits inside of, but it is not really held in place. You could probably hit that. Well, maybe you can't. It's just in there. I would assume if you tapped it hard enough, it should pop right out though, because it doesn't have an actual retainer to it or anything like that. You do want to make sure that the pin and the spring, especially the pin, goes through the hole in the reg seat though. If it doesn't, it will not function properly. All right, so that's back together. So again, a part that's very easy to rebuild. Wouldn't stress out about that too much. It's going to go like that and like that. Then you're going to have this piece, which comes off of here, and it's going to connect to the bolt, which is right there. So let's look at the on-off first. Remember this spring, if you've looked at any of the other videos with the Tippmann guns, the spring and this O-ring are meant to be floppy. Don't worry about them, or worry about it, I should say, moving around inside of there. It's okay. There's a little space that it can sit on the front right here, but it will become loose and it will just kind of move around in that. So don't worry about it. It's okay. Bolt comes off the front. Keep it oiled, keep it clean. Dirt's going to get all over this thing, so don't worry about that. It's normal. You're going to be running around outside. It is going to get dirty. That is okay. You just have to take care of it and clean it. So we're going to take the on-off assembly off. We're going to lift it off of there. Now it has two O-rings on the base of it right here, and that's what seals the block to the housing right there. So you do need to make sure that those stay okay. If this becomes loose, if you put it on and you forget to tighten it up or you barely tighten it up, that O-ring is under pressure inside there and it will actually pop out the side. It'll start to leak and have all sorts of problems. So make sure that you do tighten this on there and that it is snug. Another thing that I see happen a lot is people cross-thread these screws when they're putting them into this aluminum. The aluminum is soft, and so it is easy to do. Just make sure that you are getting those lined up. Back that screw up until you feel it drop into place, and then tighten it down. Back it up until you feel it drop, and then tighten it up. That way you know you're not cross-threading these screws in there, and your gun will last for a long time. If you just put it in there and assume it's in the right spot and start turning, there's a good chance you could muck it up. Muck. So let's pull out the on-off. Once the on-off is out, I don't think it's the same one. It is. There is a retainer piece right there, which I'm going to need. Will help grabbing a hold of. When that comes out, right there, there is a teeny tiny O-ring here. And then a little shuttle valve. If I can get it out of there. Because there's also another O-ring that sits underneath it. That's just going to fight me. Come on out. It's okay. Well, it doesn't want to come out of there for me today. I don't want to force it. I would definitely try to sit down and figure out why this is not sliding out, which is probably something I'll do after this video. So this little piece should just pop out. It's just a little brass piece. Then you can actually see it inside of there. And it slides right out, and then there's another O-ring that sits, same exact one as this. It sits on the other side back here. But we'll leave it in there. So you want to check these two O-rings. Slide that brass piece out. Check the O-ring that sits underneath it. Check this one, because this is going to sit around, yeah, like that. That goes through the piece, and then this part fits into the other end of the O-ring right there, like that. So when this moves it back and forth, it controls the airflow through here and into the bolt assembly. So it is important that everything is well maintained, lubricated, and free of any chips, defects, cuts, slices, that kind of thing. Let's go ahead and put it back together. You see that O-ring is now sitting down in there. Push our pin back in. And then put that back in there. Brain's not working. Pin doesn't go in. This goes in, and then the pin goes on top of it. Thinking to myself, why is this not fitting in here? There we go. Just like that. All right. So we're going to leave that off and disassemble our bolt. Don't want to lose that either. That's our trigger lock right there, our magazine catch. All right, so let's take this off. If you can't just unscrew this by hand like I did, sometimes it's a little tight. There are flat spots on the power tube stem right here where you can get a wrench on there and then twist it off. You do have one O-ring at the tip right there, which goes into the power tube. I want to check that one. Let's see if I can get these into here. I can. So we talked about snap ring pliers the other day. Right now this one's set up to bring the snap ring out, which we want to change. We're going to take this off and we're going to move it over to the other hole and put it back on. And now we've gone from ones that spread to ones that close. So we'll put that in there and in there. And hopefully I can get this to work, because these posts look like they're just a little bit too big to work properly. Yeah. The points on this pair of pliers are meant for a larger snap ring. Well, that's not going to work. How about I go get the tool that I need? All right, so I ran downstairs and I got the right tool. As you can see, it's almost identical to this one, just a bit smaller. And you can see how much easier this will be. I don't have to sit here and struggle with you guys. Put it in, close it up, and just take it out. Always have the right tools for the job. Words to live by. All right, so let's get this thing out of here now. I'm pretty sure you can just push it out. Like that. And then comes the rest of the way out. So this is what you see protruding out the other side right here. This, this, and this right here. So check all these O-rings. Make sure they're good. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Light coating of grease on them. All these O-rings will be in your the TPX rebuild kit, the TCR TPX rebuild kit. So pick one of those up if you're planning on doing maintenance over what they give you in your parts kit, which is not a lot that you get with the gun. If you're planning on getting this deep into your gun, you'll definitely want to pick up one of the repair kits for it so that you actually have these O-rings. In case one of them does go bad, you can switch it out. You also have one right there. That just seals the main body to the front body, to the power tube. So let's put it back together. Obviously, if you've taken it apart, clean it, inspect it, re-grease it, and put it back together. All right. All right, feels good. Put the front on. There. That's going to go on there. Always want to put some grease on there. That's going to go outside. Now, unlike some other guns that are out there, the Mini, the Axe, Axe Pro, Mini GS, this is not a directional spring. You can put it on this way, you can put it on this way. It does not matter. Those other guns, does make a difference when you put it on there. Now, instead of putting this around that and just letting it flop around, I'm going to actually put it right there for now. And we'll put the gun together, and you can leave it there. As the gun shoots and moves and does what it does on the inside, that will move, and we'll just kind of just flop around outside of there, which is okay. Let's go ahead and put our on-off valve assembly back on. So I want to check those O-rings, make sure they're good. They are. Again, backwards first. You'll feel it click. Backwards, click. No possibility of cross-threading it. Now, because you're going into soft aluminum though, there's a chance to strip it as you go through. So when you get to the point where you're snugging it up, snug is good, but don't overdo it, because you'll just turn that screw right through that aluminum and just basically thread it all out, which is even worse there because you're going to replace it. Let's get our linkage arm back in there and our magazine release. Get that in there too. Now this can get a little tricky when we go to throw everything back together right here. Getting all these pieces to line up with each other, get inside, kind of be where they need to be, especially when we're trying to fit it into this section as well, can be a little tricky. We're going to put that in there. First, we're going to put this together like that. So this is going to go gonna like this when it's all done. So you can see the angle that you need to line up with our bolt housing to get that together. So we'll actually just hook them together now, and then we will drop everything into place. And once I drop that down, I can kind of rotate this around so that everything lines up properly inside there. That's good. I'm able to fit my trigger, I believe, underneath there, so I'm okay with leaving that there. All right. Looking good. Now, one of the things that you will have to contend with is, because the stock is actually wider than the gun is, when it's resting right now, it's kind of lifted up on the backside. So it isn't perfectly flat on the table. So that's something that as we work with the gun and we go to put the cap or the other half of the body on, we can kind of level everything out. As long as it's in the right spot to begin with, we should be okay. Let's get our safety in. Our trigger in. And again, you can see you do have a little play room where you can kind of wiggle and get into everything. Now make sure that the trigger does go down into the linkage arm. We do want everything to move properly. You know what? One thing I didn't tell you guys, it's very important with these, is that on-off pin that we talked about on the bottom of the regulator, or the bolt housing, the bolt body. That on-off that has the little pin in it, it is very important when you put this in that the pin be closed and be against the body. If it's sticking out and you go to drop it in and the linkage arm is forward, you'll actually snap the pin off. So make sure that the linkage arm is back, that the pin is closed, then drop it in. It's very important. You don't want to break anything when you're putting it back together. That's the worst. Put our mag release back in. Let's go ahead and put our bolt spring in. We'll put our breech back in. Now, the breech can get a little tricky as well because the detents need to go in a certain spot. They actually fit. Let me take this out. right in the square groove that you see right there. But they also then need to pass through the window right there. So they need to fit down inside of there. And this also needs to go on there. So there's a lot of things that need to go into the same spot. So this can take a couple tries if you've never done it before. If you have done it before, it can still take a couple tries. So we'll see what happens. Compress it down. Set it in place. Now, what you'll want to do is look through the top where the other detent goes and make sure that you can see it sticking out properly inside of there. It might be kind of hard to see down in there. I can see that it's there. You can see it right there. It's down in there in that hole. It's in the right spot. Let's put that back together. Looks good. Looks like everything's lined up the way it should be. All right. Let's hope for the best, right? Okay. So last thing we need to do is get our other detent in. And obviously make sure you're putting it in the right way. When the bolt runs across it, we want to push that down. So we want to compress it down this way. So we want to make sure the bolt is running across this way, not into it like that and bending it up and breaking it like that. So our bolt is traveling in this direction, so we want it to run like that. So like that. All right. Fingers crossed. Put it back together. Now there's a couple things we still need to do once we get it back together. We'll need to put that in. Put all our screws and stuff in. That. I'm just looking around for any leftover parts, anything we missed, so that we don't have to disassemble again to put it back together. This needs to change. I can see that already. Our remote line adapter, this needs to face the other direction. Otherwise it will hit the body and not go together. Something sticky. Oh, there it is. The bolt latch or the mag latch was kind of in the way. There we go. Kind of always just look around the gun as you're putting your halves together. Don't just smash it together. If you push it in and one side goes but the other side doesn't want to go down, try to figure that section out. If you can't get it, just take it all back apart. It's not a big deal. Nobody's watching and judging you. Only me. Nut fell out. All right, so we do need to set this back into place. So let's flip it over. See our two holes right there for this. Make sure that they are lined up. They are. Go ahead and put them through. Flip it over again. All right, next, let's put our CO2 lever back in, pin up through the bottom, just like, hopefully just like that. going on here? There we go. Pops through right there. And then we can take our front shroud, throw it on the table, and put it back on. And we're back together. So at this point, test that, works there. Make sure that our remote adapter comes out. It does. Make sure that the lever works. Just go through the gun to make sure everything is as it should, and then we will put our sights back on. I'm going to leave the sights off for now, though. All right, magazine. Show you how to just clean this real quick. These are pretty simple. For the 12-round one right here, I'm going to take out all the screws. Probably should have brought a Phillips bit up here for my screwdriver, but I did not think ahead that far. They are kind of a small Phillips, so I don't think my larger screwdriver will work. It won't. So we do have to use this smaller one. And they are in plastic, so some of these screws can be a bear to get out. So there's a couple pieces inside here that will come apart and potentially get lost when we take it apart. But it's a very simple design, and it's relatively straightforward to put back together. So you have a little clip at the top right here. Once you've gotten all 6 screws out, there's a little tab up at the top which is going to release it. So we're going to take a flathead, we're going to get underneath there and gently pry it open. We don't want to just force it, because you don't want to break that tab off of there. We're going to open it up and kind of just walk it down. Just like that. Okay. It's okay that that shoots out of there. When we're trying to put it back together, we are going to, we're actually not going to put this until the very end, and it'll make more sense when you see it on the inside. But if we tried to compress this long spring in and hold it all in place and then shut these halves together, it would never work. So we'll actually leave the top of the magazine undone when it's reassembled. So we want to make sure everything stays in the right order when we go to put it together. So just by popping it open and having everything fly out, not the best choice. So we've got our mainspring, our basically kind of our, I want to call it a detent system, so it's going to sit on the top of the balls to keep them from coming out. Our release lever that runs all the way down to the bottom where the lock is, and then the spring that keeps this over the top. So we're going to take these pieces and I'm going to actually transfer them over to this side, because this spring is just loosey-goosey down here now. So I want it to be on this side, on its post where it needs to be. So first things first, take the spring and just transfer it over. We're going to take each piece over and just set it onto the side that it should be on. This piece goes over. There's a little hole right there. That's where the spring is going to go into it. So we'll take that. And there's a little hole down there where the pin is going to go into. So make sure we get the spring on, and then it goes in there just like that. Oops, I knocked it off. There we go. And that's going to kind of work like that under spring tension. All right. So now we are going to take our lock release rod and put it in from the top there. You can see when this goes down, it pulls the lock back. It releases down here at the bottom. then our kind of like our ball detent or our follower gate, and then our spring that goes up in that. So the spring is always going to push this gate up, making sure that it's over the top of the paintballs and not letting them come out when they don't need to be. Namely when the magazine is out of the gun. And then this, we're going to put in afterwards. Now, the follower that goes at the very top, so this is pushing on the paintballs. This is pushing the paintballs out as it goes up. It has one notch on it right there. The notch is going to fit towards the outside, and it's going to ride in a groove right there. So it does not go notch towards the back. You want the round, smooth side towards the back, notch towards the outside. Look at that. So let's go ahead and put our cap back on. Obviously, we just clean it out, wipe it down if you break a ball in there, whatever. But definitely do this in a place where you're not going to lose any of these parts. All right, so if you have everything lined up, you see how easy that just goes back together. I do not want to snap these top pieces together, though. I'm going to go down. I'm going to put the bottom 2 screws in, because that will hold everything together on the bottom and the top, well, in the magazine really. But it won't fall apart on me. Now I can take this and I can actually kind of open it up a little bit, which is good. So I'm going to take our spring. I'm going to pull this back at the same time. So the detent gate, I'm going to pull it back, slide the spring all the way down. I'm going to take the follower, remember notch side out, put it on there, and push it in. And then I'm going to look to make sure that notch is actually in the right spot. It's not right now. It's kind of off center, and so I can't close these pieces. So I'm going to rotate it and snap it into place. Now it's where it should be. I can lock that down, and I can go ahead and put the rest of my screws in there. Doing this magazine, it looks simple when you do it, but if you just rip it apart, I guarantee that you're going to lose that small spring that holds the lock mechanism down at the bottom, and the blue spring that holds the detent gate in place at the top. Those will not stay in place if you just pull it apart, and they'll fall on the floor, they'll fall in the dirt, they'll fall in the rocks, wherever you happen to be, and then your magazine will not work. So definitely do it on a bench, do it in a clear spot, give yourself plenty of time, lay down a towel, put something in there that is going to catch these pieces when they just spring out of your magazine. So that's it. TCR is back together. The magazine is simple. It's all back together. Ready to go out and shoot some people with it. Well, guys, I hope this helps you out with any questions or concerns you have about your paintball gear or products. And as always, for all your paintball needs, shop ansgear.com.